Welcome. Today is February 15th, 2022. Again, thank you for joining us. I'm Phil Santonzi, Program Chair for ASQ Section 1510 here in Southeast Florida. Welcome to our monthly presentation. And if you want to find out more about ASQ Section 1510, please check out our site at the Communities tab of the myasq.org website and join our LinkedIn group. It's been growing. We every month we get a report that there are more and more people are signing on to the group, which is good. And it's the same name, obviously, ASQ Southeast Florida Section 1510. I would like now to introduce Steve Kramer, who is the section chair for 1510. Steve, any words?
I just want to welcome everyone, and we appreciate your patience over this COVID nonsense. But next month we're real live and in person, but we'll still be live streaming all of our events to be able to reach all our members throughout our regions near and far. So it will be live streamed from the site, which will be at Tropical Acres. There'll be more information about that later, and it'll be posted soon to our LinkedIn site so you can follow up. But I just can't wait to actually see everybody in person. So welcome everybody. Have a great night.
Well, let's get into introducing our speakers and their presentation tonight, which is Reimagining Supply Chain Risk Management, Resilience in an Uncertain World. If you were here during the networking, you've informally met Mike Aller. He's the Director of Supplier Development at FloridaMakes. As the Director of Supplier Development, Mike's technical emphasis and strategic engagement include helping Florida's manufacturing sector across industries strengthen their domestic manufacturing supply chains and improve resilience. With national and statewide partnerships, Mike has rolled out a series of value-added tools and resources to support the interconnectedness, the growth, productivity, and resilience of Florida manufacturing ecosystem. Those resources include the CONNEX Florida Supplier Connection Platform, Supplier Opportunity Forums, assessments for supply chain risk management, and disaster recovery and resilience for manufacturers of all sizes. His earlier career brought Mike to Washington, D.C., where he served on the staff of the White House Office of Management and Budget, the Brookings Institution, and the Peterson Institute for International Economics. He holds degrees in economics and technology policy from Georgetown University and the University of California, San Diego. Mike is a former member of the United States rowing national team and lives with his wife and 2 children in Winter Park. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you.
And his co-speaker, Jason Zaborske, who's the Supplier Development Manager at FloridaMakes. In that position, Jason's responsible for developing, promoting, and updating the CONNEX Florida Supplier Connection Platform, again, which connects U.S. manufacturers and suppliers into a single, accurate, searchable supply chain database. He works to build relationships to recruit Florida suppliers and manufacturers to use the CONNEX platform. Jason's previous experience includes recruiting organizational participation and leading promotional campaigns. He was president and CEO of Capital Events and worked as an executive fundraiser for United Way of Florida and other organizations. Originally from Milwaukee, Jason grew up in Oldsmar, Florida, near Tampa, and graduated from Florida State University with a BS degree. He's very proud of his 2 amazing children, Zeus 11 and Zoe 10. Welcome to both you, Mike and Jason. Their presentation tonight, again, Reimagining Supply Chain Risk Management, Resilience in an Uncertain World. Supply chain risk management has taken on unprecedented urgency and importance given the disruptions associated with the COVID-19 pandemic across the globe. Organizations of all sizes are having to deal with disruptions in production and delivery of products and services. To improve resiliency and ensure continuity of operations, companies need to adapt inventory control and sourcing activities, as well as in some cases, pivot to new industries or new product lines due to changes in demand as we have witnessed in the last couple of years. This has underlined for companies the need for additional visibility and flexibility in existing supplier-customer relationships. It has driven the need for new tools to quickly identify alternate sources of supply or new potential customers. Mike and Jason will talk about the implications of these changes for manufacturers across the state of Florida and highlight the use of new tools such as the CONNEX Florida Supply Chain Connection Platform, to help improve visibility and resilience of supply chains. Mike, Jason, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Phil. Thank you very much to the whole team at ASQ Southeast Florida for the warm introduction, and glad to be able to be a part of the conversation today. I did want to highlight a little bit about who FloridaMakes is and what we're all about before we get going. You may be familiar, but you may not, so I just wanted to highlight that. We are a independent 501c3 nonprofit organization that works with a set of regional manufacturer associations across the state of Florida. So we have about 12 manufacturers associations that cover all of Florida, from the South Florida Manufacturing Association in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach area, clear up to the First Coast Manufacturers Association in Jacksonville, and the Northwest Florida Manufacturers Coalition in Pensacola. So cover the length and breadth of the state. We are also, as a network organization, provide a series of business advisors and local resources for manufacturers and engineering firms across the state. We are ourselves part of a broader national network called the MEP Manufacturing Extension Partnership National Network that works across all 50 states and Puerto Rico in providing technological support, engagement for manufacturers, especially small and mid-sized manufacturers throughout the nation. Obviously, manufacturing is an enormously important industry in Florida, and the last experience the last couple of years has only served to underline how important manufacturing is day to day. Within Florida, and a lot of people don't realize that Florida is a major manufacturing state. We have over 22,000 manufacturers and nearly 400,000 Floridians working in manufacturing. We have an average wage of over nearly $67,000, which is a huge boost for our local economy. We export nearly $42 billion a year in goods from Florida. Obviously, we would love to export even more, but we provide a huge boost for our economy through our exports. And GDP across the country comprises manufacturing comprises about 11% of US GDP. Within the state of Florida, it's over 5% of our gross state product, but it's growing rapidly. Manufacturing, in fact, is one of the fastest growing sectors in the state, and it has grown by leaps and bounds. Within the last couple of years, a lot of the needs in personal protective equipment and other areas we've been able to find and connect companies, bring production back to the US, back to Florida, and that really has had an impact in our economic growth, in our economic vitality, and in the resiliency of our state economy overall. And as you see, resilience is going to be a major theme of the presentation this evening and the discussion. And please don't hesitate to reach out. Don't hesitate to speak up. If you have questions at any point, please don't hesitate to highlight those and be happy to try to address them as we go. So obviously, as we've just been talking about for the last half hour or more, supply chain challenges are ubiquitous, and they are severe, and they are really, really impinging upon life, everyday life for all of us, or almost all of us. And these issues, a lot of these are logistical issues, but there are also very, very significant capacity and capability constraints that are sort of come up through the logistical challenges that we have. Simply as many folks have talked about, the sort of the collapse in demand at the beginning of the pandemic, and then a very, very strong rebound in demand, especially for goods, because folks aren't able to go out to restaurants, they aren't able to they aren't able to travel, they aren't able to use sources of disposable income in other ways than they normally would. A lot of folks have been buying exercise equipment, buying, remodeling homes, doing other things, and that has really impacted our goods supply chain and our goods logistics chain in a enormous way. And it, it was already stretched before, and then, with the combination of unprecedented demand and significant constraints in some cases because of COVID, and in some cases because of constraints that, where constraints in one part of the chain sort of impact other parts of the chain. We've had these amazing images of, for example, here off of the coast of Los Angeles and Long Beach. Back in the middle of September, there were nearly 100 ships waiting to offload. Some of them waiting more than a month and a half, simply sitting offshore when typically it would take 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks to cross the ocean, and they'd arrive and they'd be able to offload. Now it's taking upward of 60 days, most of which is just sitting outside the port waiting for them to be able to have a berth to offload. And so this was a huge problem back in September, October. It is still a huge problem. Actually, they just hit a new record in LA, Long Beach, about a month, about 3 weeks ago, right before the Lunar New Year holiday. Typically there's a huge rush of shipment because China shuts down for a couple of weeks for the holiday. And so they ship a whole bunch of stuff out the door. And so it went back up to about 115 ships about 3 weeks ago. And so they're actively trying to figure out ways to redivert those to other places, including Florida. There's a huge effort here in Florida to bring some of those ships closer here through the Panama Canal. They're now actually beginning to back up in Georgia and a couple of the other major ports on the East Coast. So we're seeing this not just on the West Coast anymore. There's been a lot of effort on this in the national level, both at the administration and in Congress. Congress has actually passed a couple of bills. Congress hardly does anything these days except what they absolutely have to do, but supply chain has gotten to the point where supply chain is something that they absolutely have to do. So they passed an infrastructure bill, which has a lot of money for new port infrastructure, new rail infrastructure, new road infrastructure, new airport infrastructure. But they also have this Innovation Competition Act and the American Competes Act, which is going to invest in our manufacturing and organic supply sector to the tune of $250 billion over 10 years, including $50 billion in semiconductor production. We were talking earlier about sort of the slowdown in auto production because of issues with especially older generations of chips that go into autos and appliances and other things. And a lot of the challenges that you're seeing in supply is really in some of these, they're not the cutting edge chips, but they're chips that are a couple of generations old, but they are extraordinarily difficult to find and in many cases are not made anywhere in North America. A lot of these are made in Korea and Taiwan and a couple other places. And so they have to be shipped over. And for a long time, there was a challenge because there wasn't very much commercial air traffic going on. And so a lot of commercial airliners ended up getting converted wholesale into air cargo. And they're still working through those issues. We also have a number of other resources that we and our network have provided, where we actually have a supply chain risk management toolkit for small manufacturers that's relevant actually for small businesses of all types. We'll be highlighting and referencing some of the aspects of that in the context of this presentation. So if you see some things that are interesting, they're probably at least part from that. And we can talk about those in a bit. So one of the things we talk about is this cascading effect of supply chain disruption. So we have, delayed shipments and long lead times that create shortages of critical parts and materials, that create difficulties for adjusting production because we've been operating in a just-in-time modality here for 20, 30 years now, and increasingly more and more so. And then all of a sudden we have these large-scale global disruptions that are essentially meaning that a lot of companies are now beginning to go back to a hybrid just-in-time, just-in-case type of inventory management, where some of the larger firms are beginning to actually stockpile critical materials, stockpile certain aspects of their supply needs. And that is in itself, just as we were all buying toilet paper a year and a half ago, or going on 2 years now, and that was really creating a lot of challenges. Many companies of all sizes are being to stockpile components, and that's creating its own shortages as well. And because of all of this, it's been extraordinarily difficult to plan amid customer demand and unstable supply. You probably heard some stories about Peloton and some of their challenges where they had they'd been one of the real winners of the pandemic, and then they had been ramping up production and ramping up a lot of initiatives, and then they were seeing demand for some of their products go down as people were beginning to go back to gyms and beginning to go back to sort of their normal routines, and they had reached saturation in some of their core markets, and so they're really kind of being whipsawed by some of these adjustments in demand, which are happening in some cases in weeks, depending on what's happening with a particular variant of the virus. And no one can plan a supply chain. Supply chains take months at best, oftentimes years, and you simply can't plan for situations that change in a matter of 3 or 4 weeks. It's just not possible. So what does this mean for companies and for all of us? It means that companies have to be really able to sort of look at themselves and look at their business and kind of be proactive in how they address issues, but just simply being proactive is not necessarily enough. So one of the things that we as MEP centers and folks who look at supply chain risk management and resilience and many of these issues, there's this matrix that has been developed, and this is really an interesting analysis, so I wanted to go into it in a little bit of detail. But there are kind of 2 different axes here. So the y-axis is the ability to recover from a negative shock in a timely manner, being responsive to something. For that matter, you can also recover, or the other is the ability to capitalize on opportunities in a timely manner in the x-axis, where if something comes up, are you able to pivot to be able to take advantage of that? And there are different aspects of where companies lie within this framework. If you're not able to capitalize on opportunities or not able to recover, then you're in a very poor place, and there's a lot of things that you need to be working on. But even if you are focused, as many companies are, on being able to capitalize on opportunities quickly, if you're not able to also pivot when things don't go your way, being proactive is great, but if you end up making yourself more vulnerable, exposing yourself to more risk, that in fact can be a real challenge, and that you end up being like a Peloton, where you are being proactive about what you're realizing, but you're vulnerable to shocks, and you're vulnerable to being sort of locked into certain decisions and contracts and commitments. Likewise, if you're responsive, and you're able to pivot if something bad happens, but not necessarily be able to capitalize if something good happens, it's good to be protective. It's good to be conservative, but at the same time, if you're not taking advantage of opportunities, you really could be missing out. And so, what is it that's necessary to be able to provide flexibility for yourselves to be responsive and proactive? What is it that's necessary to be able to be resilient? And one of the things that we're finding when we're looking at companies that are in these positions, looking at companies that are addressing these things, is that there is kind of a whole range of things that they need to be doing. And this goes back into looking at supply chain risk management in a much broader context. So supply chain risk management traditionally has been looking at logistics, and it's looking at those folks that are directly underneath you within your particular supply silo, and saying, okay, who can get me the product at the least cost for the base level of quality and efficiency that I'm looking to provide, and that's essentially how we have optimized our supply chains for the last 30, almost 40 years now, and that has enabled a lot of great cost savings, and we've increased living standards overall, not only in the U.S. and North America, but across the world that way. But what we're also finding is that, especially, it's not just the pandemic. We have a number of different stressors, whether it's natural disasters, whether it's increasing workforce challenges, so many different issues that we're having to deal with, and supply chain risk management, cybersecurity, which we'll get into a little bit further. All of these things, there's an enormous need for quality and assurance and trust across all sorts of different facets. And so it's not just are you able to deliver it on time and at basic cost and at basic quality, but what is the security of that? Are you able to do this consistently? Are you able to keep up with innovation and the constant turn of technology? Are you able to have your people, find your people, train your people, retain your people? How are your relationships with all of your different suppliers, with your customers? Oftentimes it isn't in order to be resilient, it isn't just being able to sort of be able to rely on the marketplace as a transactional entity, but actually being able to build relationships, be able to understand the needs of your customers, be able to understand the needs of your suppliers, being able to sort of pivot and understand sort of the broader environment that you operate within. Obviously, delivery is important, and delivery is a challenge these days. But being able to do all these things and do that, with an aspect of resiliency is really what supply chain risk management is all about. It's a much broader, much more comprehensive initiative than it used to be. So, when we were looking at supply chain risk management before, supply chain risk management was mostly these two little slices in the lower right, the planning and scheduling and the ongoing supply chain management. Those were the things that most people thought of as supply chain management going forward. But realistically, supply chain management these days is almost all aspects of your business. It's a holistic view of assessing where you are, what your business management capacities are, what you're able to do, what you're not able to do, and looking at this from a really a holistic, what your cash flow looks like, and engaging cash flow, because many folks now are realizing that, while they could maybe, float 14 days or 30-day delivery times, they can't float 90-day delivery times for components. And so, they're having to look at their financial cash model and adjust their cash flow model. Many different things that this is sort of underlining as broader issues. And so I don't want to spend too much time on this because there's a lot that's on the slide. It's an enormous eye chart, but just highlighting that there are all sorts of different aspects of supply chain risk that go into supply chain risk management, whether it's looking at your sales and your sales pipeline, looking at your customer relationship management and how you build your relationships, looking at your project management and how you enable, how you look and prepare for change and update, looking at your product management and what your bill of materials is, sort of what your lead times are, what are those tentpole items that you need to cover. Production, how your production is going, what are the challenges that you see there. Planning and scheduling, looking at demand, supply, what's the market doing. Then, supplier relationships, purchase management, freight management, cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is an enormous issue across all of these because there are folks out there who are actively either trying to disrupt or through ransomware or other things inject themselves into critical systems and extract value for themselves. And all these things are necessary realities of doing business in the 21st century that we need to be thinking about, we need to be planning for, and we need to be addressing in the process of just doing our everyday day-to-day jobs. And so one of the things that we at FloridaMakes have been doing through all of this is trying to assess and bring to bear certain key tools, certain key resources that enable folks to be able to get greater visibility in certain aspects of their operations. Obviously, we're only going to sort of taking a one small slice of this broader initiative. But if you are interested in this and you are interested in more aspects of other sides of the supply chain risk management framework that I've outlined here, be more than happy to dive into those. And and it even goes into your human capital management and workforce and things that people I don't think ever thought of as a supply chain issue, but in our current environment and our current with the great resignation or great reshuffle or whatever you want to call it, that absolutely is a part of the equation now. So what I want to do is transition over and talk a little bit about one specific resource that we have. It does offer companies an opportunity to have a greater visibility into their own supply chain, into their own resources. And it's called CONNEX Florida. And Jason, if you want to highlight and take it away as to what CONNEX Florida is all about.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike, and thanks for that really great overview. I think leading in from where Phil started with going around the table to seeing what everyone really has been impacted about with supply chain in one shape, form, or another. And 3 years ago, I probably would say people, when you think about supply chain, it would not come up as a top of the mind question or a round table sitting there across the dinner table. I couldn't find this or that or the other. I can't get a car. When something breaks down, the panic, the anxiety of something like that, to find a replacement part for something that's old, and a lot of the same things that consumers are seeing, folks like yourself, manufacturers are seeing, and so at FloridaMakes, our main thrust is to provide solutions and promote manufacturing in the state of Florida, and work on building our ecosystem and our community for Florida manufacturers. And one thing that our organization has done over the last couple of years is invest in a supply chain database and tool that allows manufacturers in the state, and we have by our estimates 25,000 manufacturers in the state of Florida, that we are hoping to connect to this platform that will allow them to, first off, promote their abilities in a real manufacturing type of language that everyone in manufacturing can understand and can relate to. There's a lot of different databases and tools out there. This database, CONNEX, was developed through partnerships with the state of Utah and and the Utah MEP. As Mike mentioned, we are the MEP Manufacturers Extension Partnership here in Florida. There's 50 other centers like us, 51 if you include, well, 50 if you include Puerto Rico and us, that work on sourcing items for manufacturers and finding when a manufacturer is looking and staring down at a supplier that's run out of chemicals or run out of a certain product or can no longer produce this product anymore, how that impacts their all of their processes on down the line to all the way directing it to consumers, and you see in the increases and inflation that you're seeing across the board. So we've invested in this tool the last year and a half and done a lot of work to grow it, to get it to a place where it is even today, where we have about 8,000 manufacturers in the state, listed in our database. We drill down to a lot of things, and we'll talk a little bit more about, how manufacturers can showcase their capabilities, how they manufacture a product, what goes into that, their processes, what materials are used, and their overall, this is, I guess you would say, where to find it, how to find a guide for Florida manufacturing. So people right now and folks, we do have the ability to go onto our website and search and find manufacturers. So if you're looking to produce and manufacture a specific product, or you're looking to find something and you are a manufacturer, this is where you would go to. The cost for manufacturers to utilize this is free. The cost for people like yourself to go on there and look at these things are free. There's a little bit more detail that's given to manufacturers who are searching for other manufacturers in terms of access, but this is the tool we've developed, and we're one of right now 6 states in the country that is utilizing this platform, and many more I think are coming on board to join forces with us, and soon to be there's going to be, this is really derived for Florida manufacturers, and like I mentioned, there's 5 other states, soon to be more. Then we're also going to be working on building a national supply chain database, the Manufacturers Marketplace and Connex Marketplace nationally, that we can expand beyond our borders here in Florida. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, this specific tool is really highlighting manufacturing in Florida. It allows our manufacturers to find new sources. A lot of times manufacturers are, don't really know what's even in their backyard, and geographically finding a supplier of a specific, either a machine shop or someone to cut gaskets is not an easy thing to just Google. So, and when you're using Google, you're not really being able to really find what the core of that manufacturer's abilities are just by visiting their website or looking at a listing. So this really is a complex tool that offers sort of the framework for manufacturers to find folks that are in their areas that whether they're having a supply chain breakdown or not, they can build their supply chain to be more resilient. So they may have somebody that's a steady supplier of chemicals used for their manufacturing process. If that, the folks that are looking and are on the front lines and they're in these larger companies are having the foresight to look ahead and find alternatives to those manufacturers that they're currently working with. So if and when that manufacturer does, break down or that supply chain collapses, they're able to find and have ready-made a alternate to that current manufacturer. So We talked a little bit about the detail that goes into this database. We have a lot of certifications within manufacturing that are listed in companies' profiles, ISO and CMMC, and there's a ton of other ones that I think that you know, we don't need to get into the detail, but what equipment that they use, manufacturers are using, where they're located. There's a big move, I think, in general, to find, as Mike mentioned, the shipping issues from China. You know, manufacturers are starting to and have been since COVID, I think, looking at ways that they can find and source things locally. You know, because of the delays, things are still cheaper coming from China and Thailand and other places. But if there's an alternative in their background, people are really starting, and manufacturers are starting to look at, you know, what's out there here. It's going to cost a little bit more to be made in the USA. But now they're looking at it as a long-term solution potentially too, because they want to be able to say that. And this is one of those things where we can focus, even having as many manufacturers utilizing Florida-based manufacturers in their supply chain ecosystem. Talked about industry sectors, materials, whether they're using aluminum, rubber, plastic, stainless steel, a number of things like that. You have NAICS code and SIC codes, products and services, what that company offers, you know, and what their core, I guess, competency is, and what their main focus is. And any kind of small business designations, woman-owned, minority-owned, which a lot of our bigger OEMs and large manufacturers sometimes are looking for when they're sourcing or looking for new suppliers of services. We talked a little bit, I think, you know, this kind of goes into where we're, you know, the most popular searches, you know, during COVID, we were heavily reliant. People really kind of look to FloridaMakes and to us to find where they can find masks and PPE and sanitizers and all the things that were going out. Not toilet paper. I don't think we really sourced any of that, but everyone was feeling that back then, and we became a real resource. And I think Connex really grew in leaps and bounds during that time. Not only because of the absence of face-to-face things and being able to go out and meet people and go to trade shows, that sort of ability has dwindled, you know, massively. It's starting to come back a little bit, but having a tool like this in a manufacturer's back pocket is a great resource to be able to find it with the click of a button and a simple search. I mentioned earlier about buying local and onshoring abilities. This database and tool allows manufacturers and people that are looking to find manufacturers of products, drill down to find people in their local area. The search functionality and the search filter system, we can drill down into all those things by clicking on a few clicks to find somebody within 100 miles of yourself, or having a certain certification, or a small business program, or specific materials. So really this tool allows someone to really pinpoint what they're looking for, and it gives them the search functionality to find those folks that they're really, you know, looking to seek out by in great specifics. So another great thing about this tool, and there's a lot of tools out there. Connex is really, I think, a manufacturer-centric database that allows manufacturers to do a lot of things on their own. You know, some of the other databases that are out there are rather static in a lot of ways. There's the information, and there's, you know, if a company puts their profile in, it's there, and the manufacturer can't really do anything after that. Our tool here allows manufacturers to not only search and find things, but also post their needs or their surpluses to the entire community. And that's, I think, one of the big, huge selling points in terms of, helping manufacturers to find new business opportunities. And the Exchange Center is one of them. As I mentioned, as an MEP center here in Florida, we get leads, we get sourcing for various products, and it runs the gamut to machining parts, to chemicals, to food products, to packaging, on down the line, matching up people with those specific criteria. And what we are able to do is, once we post those in our Exchange Center, and we get those from different parts of the country, or they're posted here by manufacturers themselves, it's sort of a great tool in that any manufacturers that's in Connex can list their own needs, post them, and source them, and get responses in real time from manufacturers looking to looking to bid on it, find more information on it, and there's ability to post CAD designs and drawings in there, so people can get as specific as they want to in terms of these postings and finding things that they need. And manufacturers, by being a part of this, have the opportunity to view those needs, get notified when those postings come out, and be hopefully put in contact with the person that's looking to source that stuff directly, so that they can start getting involved with communications and bidding and quoting, and hopefully contracting with whoever that is that is looking for those specific capabilities.
We've actively used this, and we've actually been able to use this across the country. So in this case, we've had a large prime, Lockheed Martin, sorry, Northrop Grumman Spatial Propulsion Systems, that was looking for some very specific capability for a major aerospace contract that they had won. And they were, this was a new contract, so it was kind of new opportunity, new business for companies. And so they were looking, they put out a call to say, we're looking for this specific capability. And this company, this section of the company was actually out of Utah, but we were able to sort of bring this opportunity to Florida manufacturers to highlight the opportunity to support this national program. In fact, several of the companies, and a couple of very first companies that were selected under this opportunity were Florida companies, because Florida companies had the capability that they needed, and we were able to get them linked up with Northrop. And in many cases, a couple of the companies we were working with, they were doing a lot of work for the aviation industry, especially the commercial aviation industry, which with COVID had taken an enormous hit. And so they were actively looking for new business because they were going to have to lay people off otherwise. And through this, we were able to get them engaged in the aerospace and defense industry, similar industry, but not the same. And they were able to actually retain many of the people that they would have otherwise had to let go. So it was really a great success story for us. We've had several other larger OEMs that have sourced through Connex to date, and we have more that are coming online all the time. Jason, if you want to talk about the connection on the national as well, we don't just have these one-to-one connections, but yeah.
Sure, I mentioned earlier that our CONNEX Florida is really specifically designed for Florida manufacturers and the Florida manufacturing ecosystem. Come April, we're actually going to be combining our platforms with the Manufacturers Marketplace to create the Connex Marketplace, which will have the ability for manufacturers to pay a small fee to expand their search nationally. So the same tools that we have that I kind of went over, and the same capabilities and specifics that are in our database in Florida is going to be expanded to the national marketplace. And through our partnership with FloridaMakes and Connex, we're able to provide our Florida manufacturers with free access to that. some of our manufacturers through promotions and other opportunities as we go forward. We'll have that same ability to get a promotional code to try the manufacturer's marketplace out nationally for free for a trial period. And then, I think today, I heard that they have 150,000 manufacturers in that database nationally. So the same abilities that we have here in Florida are now going to be able to cross the border because a lot of manufacturers don't look at it as having to be inside Florida or finding someone right down the road. They want to find somebody that's going to do their specific, meet their specific needs, their specific requests. And so this tool is going to be able to deliver that ability to expand it beyond Florida, because there's tons of things that Florida does very well in terms of manufacturing, but there's other things that are a virtual desert in some ways that other states and do very well. So, in terms of how we promote this, if there's manufacturers here on the call that want to learn more about how to get involved with Connex, I'm happy to be the point person and help them navigate this, get an account set up, be searched and be found, and get exposed to some of these great unique opportunities that we have through the system. And anyone else that's looking to learn more about getting into manufacturing or maybe has a great invention or idea that they're thinking of and wants to find a manufacturer that might be able to help them in the product design analysis of that, let us know as well, and we'll be happy to help. So,
and then in terms of supply chain visibility, Connex also has some very unique tools to be able to enable companies to provide visibility of their individual supply chain, and so you can have information on your own company's individual supply chain, and then be able to highlight single supplier risk. It runs a background check on all aspects of on all of the suppliers that you put in that might be within your own supply chain or might be prospective suppliers, so you can run a quick background check on them against do not contract lists or government blacklists. And it also enables you to identify and highlight alternate suppliers directly from your own sort of supply chain visualization. And this is a proprietary aspect of the portal that you at your own company are the only ones who have access to that information. So it's for your own benefit and for your own improvement.
A lot of our smaller manufacturers really love that tool because it does do background checks on, through Department of Commerce and other places to see if your current suppliers are on a blacklist or they have financial risk, or if you have a single supplier risk that's involved with that. That visualization tool is a very cool tool that again is sort of unique to the Connex database. It's also confidential to the manufacturer themselves. A lot of manufacturers don't want to necessarily share all that information or have that be known who their customers are, who their manufacturers currently are. So in utilizing that tool, they're able to do that in a confidential manner that even us as the administrators of the database aren't able to see. So provides a whole nother layer of security, which is very important, especially when you're dealing with defense contractors and aerospace and national security. So yes, Mike here has the access page, which you'll see on the bottom of the page is how you would get to finding out more about Connex and supply chain.
And if you're interested, you can fill out the account request page.
If you're a manufacturer, you want to do that.
If you're a manufacturer, good. One of the things that we were able to do with this, we were able to identify a number of different response capabilities across the state of Florida related to COVID response. So we had several companies that made ventilators, many companies that made face shields, face masks. And we were able actually to work with local hospital systems to provide local PPE supply chains for critical materials, especially early in the pandemic when it was really, really hard to find things. But many of those have continued and have grown since. We also, it enables us to review, enables companies to see their supplier ecosystem and sort of look at their ecosystem, their own ecosystem holistically, and figure out how to build their resilience. And then a couple more success stories that we've had, and then we'll go into Q&A. One in particular, in identifying ventilator manufacturers, and there was a small company in Melbourne area, just north of you all in the Space Coast, that made ventilators typically for transport application. So it would be something that you'd use in an ambulance to keep somebody alive going from one facility to another, or from a accident or so on to the critical trauma facility. And this company was making maybe 30 to 50 units a month before the pandemic. And then right as the pandemic was beginning to start, they started getting some very large orders for them in the order of hundreds of units from New York and California. And they came to us because they realized that their supply chain that they had wasn't going to be able to meet the demand for these hundreds of units. They're also going to have to staff up and some other things, but we were able to help them identify some companies close by, actually a couple of them literally in their backyard, that were able to, in a couple of cases, reverse engineer a couple of the components and then produce them at scale. And shortly after that happened, beginning of the pandemic, we got a call from the administration saying, we understand you have a ventilator manufacturer in Florida. We said, yes, we've been helping them, scale up a little bit. And they said, well, what do you mean scale up? And we said, well, hundreds of units. And they were saying, well, how many thousands or tens of thousands do you think they could make? And we said, well, yeah, I know you gonna have to ask them. So they got brought up to the White House, brought into this big national meeting with cabinet secretaries and others, introduced to Ford Motor Company and GE Healthcare. And they basically turned over the plans for their ventilator and said, well, let's go see how many thousands of these we can make. And ultimately they got a contract for 50,000. And Ford ended up turning over part of one of the F-150 factories up in Detroit solely for ventilator manufacturing. And in the meantime, we were helping them identify and scale some of their production. So many of the folks that we helped them identify to be able to scale to a few hundred, ultimately ended up providing 50,000 or components for the 50,000 units that were produced. And we ended up doing that. I think we got started in April. They ended up delivering the final batch of units by the middle end of August. So within 4 months, we had this major national mobilization. We're able to produce this enormous amount of product and do it entirely, this was entirely locally sourced, because we just didn't have time to be able to ship it from anywhere else, get it from anywhere else. So that was an enormous thing. And we did a lot of that through Connex and through the connections that we were able to build through that resource. Likewise, we have a lot of different opportunities. We're engaging with a lot of larger manufacturers about supply opportunities. Many folks are really, really interested in localizing their supply chain. Major firms, these are mostly aerospace firms, but we have some other major firms in other industries that are also greatly interested and so have been actively engaging in that as well. With that, we're coming up on 8 o'clock, so I wanted to open it up for questions. And thank you very much again for the opportunity to bring this forward.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Jason. Yeah, any questions? If you can speak up and you can ask it directly, or you can write it in the chat. I'll read it for you. Either way.
I had a question about the last company that you were discussing, to make the ventilators or to supply the components to the ventilators. For medical devices, you need to qualify those suppliers. And it seems to me that it's very quick to go from trying to source it in April to production in August. So how did that work?
Yes, that's a very, very astute question. And basically what was done was in the process of doing this, the FDA sort of brought in an inspection team in the process of getting this set up. And there were some emergency use authorizations that also were a part of this, where they essentially sort of signed off on certain things. But the FDA was brought in from the very beginning to sort of go through and do site inspections at several of the providers that we had identified. Many of those providers did not have traditional FDA CGMP certifications, but they did often have ISO and AS9100 and some other aerospace type certifications. In some cases, the specific component that was being produced was not one that was in the interface with the patient. It was something within the electronics or so on of the system, and they essentially just sort of let that go with a kind of reciprocity type of agreement. And these ventilators have been in use. We didn't need as many ventilators as we thought we did to start with, but many of the ventilators have been in use since, and they have not had any significant recalls or issues with the production run that happened. So I suppose it was done very, very quickly, but it was also done in sort of a risk adjusted way. So there was much more kind of scrutiny on the things that were directly involving the patients and less scrutiny on the things that weren't, for that, because they all knew that we all knew that speed was of the utmost in this case. So, but no, thank you for the question, and that's absolutely a challenge in medical devices and from time immemorial. So.
Well, once again, thank you very much, Mike and Jason. We appreciate you joining us tonight to bring this information and discussion about supply chain to our section.